Welcome back to the Kaleidospoke podcast with myself, Aaron, and the lovely Richie Rich. We're on episode 6 now. I checked. I know it's episode 6. So if you haven't already, follow us on all major platforms, Spotify, Apple. Give us a review, subscribe, follow us on our socials. They'll be in the description below. And today, we're doing something a little bit different. Got a guest. And this man has been working in a community for at least 40 years. He's led the way on inclusion and diversity in the workplace. And this is probably the most important thing he's ever done. He's happened to birth one of the greatest minds of the 20th century. I won't say who it is, but he's speaking right now. This is Joe O'Loughlin, who happens to also be my father. Welcome, sir.
Yeah, it's lovely to be with one of the greatest minds of the 21st century, or is it the 31st century? You got good genes, so yeah, you should boast about them. Keep them up there. And you guys are doing a good job with this podcast. I hope lots of people are listening, because they ought to listen. They're going to get wisdom, knowledge, entertainment, all kinds.
Yeah, I mean that's the goal. That's the goal, and hopefully some people learn something from this, and in this podcast at least learn something from you, and of course us guys always bless our listeners with our lovely voices, right, Rich?
Oh yeah, we just got wisdom upon wisdom and that lovely voice, radio voice.
The radio voice.
I just hope anything anybody learns from me today, they forget very quickly, because it could get them taken to a dark place. And with one of those jackets that button up from behind, in a white cell.
One of those.
One of those. Because I think we're going to go all over the place today. So we're not going to keep it straight, are we?
Oh no. There's no such thing as a straight line. Straight lines are boring.
Yeah.
And boring's not what you get with us. So let's find out a little bit more about you. Like, so how long is it that you've kind of been working with the community on this inclusion of people from minority and ethnic backgrounds?
Well, you were very kind in your introduction, and you gave me 40 years, but I'm 65 now, so I must have been at this since the age of about 15. I got out of school, and back in the day, I grew up in Birmingham. Let me start at the beginning. I was born in Nevis in the Caribbean, the twin islands of St. Kitts and Nevis. And Nevis is the smaller of the two islands. There's only 11,000 people on the island. And probably worldwide, there's maybe another 3,000 or 4,000. So we're talking about 15,000 people from my background on the planet. So we're very unique people. And we got to Birmingham, which was a little bigger than Nevis, actually. and we discovered that most of the population there didn't kind of like the look of us, didn't like how we walked, didn't like the fact that we had flared trousers and we dressed up and looked cool, and we had trilby hats, and we had that move. So
that swagger.
The swagger. You guys think you just invented the swag, but we had the swag back in 1960, and it was big swag because we had flares. So when we moved, it really swagged. But those were kind of dark days. I think some of you will know about the mythical boarding houses where they had up signs saying no dogs, no blacks, no Irish. Well, my name is O'Loughlin, so that's an Irish name. I was black, so only the dogs were doing better than the O'Loughlins, and so we kind of had to deal with discrimination from the bat, right off the bat. And so when I got out of school at 15, that was kind of part of my existence, always having to be the other and to try and challenge discrimination. Because back in the day, they had something called color bar. A color bar is essentially apartheid. You could go into town and you could go shopping and do all kinds of stuff, but when it came to nightclubs, if you were a black guy, you just couldn't get in them. And they had this thing, they'd say, sorry, go. This is after you've queued there for like half an hour, trying to get into this club because there was some interesting looking people in there. And you'd queue for half an hour and you inch forward to the door and you'd get close to the door and the bouncer would just leave the door and he'd come and say, lads, have you got a membership card? And we'd say, of course, no, we don't have a membership card. So only members can come in. You've been doing this for like 20 minutes and you're watching you get close to the door. And now he tells you 2 seconds away from the door that you can't get in. So we'd say, look, how do we get in? He said, well, you have to be a member. Yeah, well, you have to fill out a membership form. So we'd say, how do you do that? You'd have to come inside to fill out a membership form. So, okay, let us in. And he said, no, you can't come inside because you're not a member. So it was one of those catch-22 situations. It was mad. So, when you hear about blues, our own street parties, our own house parties, that's why we had to invent blues. We had these sound systems. You all know about sound systems. You're all doing it on little mini things. Back then, it was speakers the size of a wardrobe, and you put them on lorries, and you got to a deserted house, and they're always derelict houses because they're like squatters. And then you get to this deserted house, and you hear boodum, 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 and the roof would be shaking. You'd be quite scared of going in there because the roof could come down. Quaker City, Jashaka, some of the great sound systems. Some of them would come up from London, Admiral Ken. So that set me up in a sense for dealing with Britain, which was not a hospitable place. So I suppose my consciousness arose out of always having to fight, that kind of discrimination. But it's not ended. I think we all have to have a sense of justice, social justice. And if you've got that, I think that guides you in your life. If you haven't got that and it's something that doesn't affect you, I think you will live a very different life. And you get surprised sometimes when suddenly it hits you. And I spend a lot of time working with people in the NHS and elsewhere, trying to help them to come to terms with the fact that they're doing all this stuff, putting in hard service, hard graft, and then suddenly they say, "You got to get out of here. We don't like you." Or worse still, you've got a nurse who's supporting somebody who's sick in their bed, really sick, badly sick, and their family comes in and says, "Get your dirty something hands off my mother. I want a white nurse." Imagine that. You're trying to save somebody's life, their family's life, and yet this thing about being a different color stands in the way of their common sense. So that's my way of introduction. Why I'm into that social justice thing. Part of my life.
I mean, yeah, it's crazy that at this point in time, of course, the struggle still goes on, but it's almost like an evolution of the struggle. It's not so it's not so overt. It's much more covert now, and I think through especially some of the events of last year with Black Lives Matter, it's becoming more difficult for people that potentially are racist to overtly say these things and carry out actions to kind of obviously discriminate against people. So yeah, it's interesting to hear your perspective from back in 1920 when the
when we had flares and dinosaurs.
pretty much.
Pterodactyls flew the earth.
Yeah.
But you say that things has got better or different. I'm not sure that anything's got any better. It's certainly different. I think there's just a different level of the way that people express discrimination against people who look like us. Now it's not crude, so you don't get the no blacks, no dogs, no Irish stuff. What you get is people using institutions to make decisions that block you from going where you want to go. So you could be a junior person in an organization, and suddenly you hit this wall, and it's a wall. It's a very insidious wall because it's a wall of hidden triggers. They say, "Oh, well, you didn't do so well at the interview because," and they'll give you a whole range of different reasons why you didn't do so well at that interview. And somebody else competed, and there were lots of people who presented, and you didn't quite measure up, and then you find out that your qualifications are superior to the person who got the job, and then you find out after the person's appointed that you have to train them in the job because you know the job better, and you kind of think, I'm wondering what's going on here. this doesn't add up. So it's that kind of subtlety. Back in the day, they used to just turn you away from the factory door, and that's happened to me several times. Do you remember telephone boxes? You guys are probably too young
Yep.
to remember telephone boxes, but you remember telephone boxes. Yeah, the only time you see them now is on American movies when they want to show London looking like London looks like, black cab telephone boxes and and letter boxes. Well, you used to have to go into the telephone box and ring up if you wanted a job. You call them up, put your coin in the thing and ring up and say, have you got a job as a welder? Well, for me, it was electrician. Have you got a job as an electrician? They say, yeah. What's your name? Joel O'Loughlin. Oh, come along. So you get along there, and you turn up at the factory door, and guess what? They take one look at you, and they'd say, no, there was a guy in about half an hour before you. The job's gone, I'm afraid. And that'd go on on a regular basis. So I think it was in the mid 1950s, 60s, where things started to change. And they brought in the Race Relations Act in 1976, and so on. But these things we take for granted, but they were hard won. The Race Relations Act was brought in because people rioted in Notting Hill. Notting Hill where they make carnival. So Trinidadians, and I love Trinidadians because they don't skin up and take no nonsense. So white folks used to beat them, try to beat them up on streets. So of course they just what we call ras them a lot, and there were riots in Notting Hill, and that led to the Race Relations Act because I think government kind of figured out, well, you can't have open race warfare on the streets, so let's put something in place to prevent open, overt discrimination on the grounds of a person's race. But he drove some stuff underground, but a lot of it's still here with us. And what we got to do is to make sure that we make our young people, our children, our friends conscious of all of that, the history of it. It's a strange thing that history is something that people don't like to look at too much. I can understand partly because it's painful, and partly that it takes time, and you have to read stuff to get there, to get an appreciation of what's happened. But it's so important that you understand that, because without it, you could just go through life blindly and unconsciously and get surprised by the fact that people don't like you because you look like you.
Yeah. It's funny how you mentioned what's taught, and we need to teach ourselves and read back to history, because I guess in essence that's kind of what we have Black History Month for, albeit, should it be just taught in 1 month, or should it be highlighted in 1 month, or actually a part of a school curriculum to kind of to spread the word and sort of educate everyone from all type of backgrounds to say this is kind of what everyone went through, or what people of color went through. But it's funny how changes happen when these movements come, like Martin Luther King and his movement at his time, and then you spoke about the Notting Hill riots, or some might call them riots, or some might call them protests, and these acts, right? This energy is kind of built up, and reluctancy, and even these recent times, Black Lives Matter. It's like you need this. And it goes to show us it has been effective. These kind of large crowds getting together and standing up and saying no more, or
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in going back to the why read. while looking to who you are and where you came from and world history and everybody else's history as well, because our history doesn't sit inside history by itself. It's impacted by European history, it's impacted by American history, and a whole range of other things. But I'm always been a fond believer in self-help. If you all remember, we used to have Saturday schools. Caribbean people had Saturday schools.
Yeah, I was sent there when all my friends were playing out. I was in Saturday school, but as an adult now, I appreciate it.
It's done you a lot of good. You have some sense as a result. Let me tell you about that boy. I call him a boy because he's my boy. He was the prettiest of babies that you can imagine. He was just so clear skinned and
Oh,
he had these lovely cheeks. He was like a kissable ball of humanity.
oh.
He just was. And I put that down to the fact that he's got half of the best genes that ever lived on this planet, and the other half are mine. But I think when you have children, you also begin to understand your responsibilities, not just to yourself, because I think before you have children, you probably, not everybody, but you probably live a self-interested and solitary life where you kind of think it's all about you. When you have children, suddenly you have to take responsibility for things, and that is actually should be a trigger for us to look into our past. And and if we want to be more than one generation of people, you're calling them woke now, but conscious people, then you need to start with your children and do self-help things. Send them to school, send them to teach them in the house, teach them anywhere you go. As you're walking down the street, talk to them about what the street looks like. What is a street? What's your position in this street? What's going to come around the next corner? Because you're preparing them for life. And often people say, well, I don't really want, they're all children and I don't really want to mess up their mind with all of the nasty things that happened in the past. Things are much better now. That was back in the day. And then George Floyd dies and you realize, this is serious business. That's in the United States. Here we had Stephen Lawrence, just as big as an occasion for us as George Floyd was for the Americans, not
Yeah.
as big globally,
Yeah.
and so that can just happen. There you are, sitting in your house, and you get a call from somebody saying that your child is dead. Some white racist decided to stab him up and leave him in a pool of blood. And when the police comes along, what do? You know, uh, the guy, Stephen's friend who was with him, they automatically think because he looks like that he was the guy who stabbed him. So they they arrested that guy. Do you know? He's telling them, "Look, my friend, we both got attacked. I ran away. I got lucky." And they say, "Yeah, did you stab him? Where's your knife? Shake him down." All of that because we look
Crazy.
like we look like.
Yeah.
So you need to let our people know that things are hunky dory. It's a preparation for life. You hope that these things will never happen to your own, but you've got to prepare them for anything.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting that you kind of brought up George Floyd and our version in a way with Stephen Lawrence. So there's a ton of similarities for the story of the African man in the UK and the story of the African man around the rest of the world. So in your journey, more so in the workplace, but in your journey, what would you say some of the differences are between the story of not just African men or African women, but the story of people from minorities in the UK versus places like the States?
Mm. Yeah, the States is really screwed up on race, really, really. The difference is guns and that systemic holding black people in place using military force. Because if you ever look at the armaments, there's a lot of talk about defunding the police now, And people think that this just means taking money away from the police. But actually, it's taking certain parts of the police budget away from them. Because you know what those guys buy with the budget? They buy tanks, they buy Hummers, they buy automatic pistols, they buy machine guns, all of those kinds of things. You're policing a local community. Let's say it's Peckham. Would you expect that you need a machine gun and a tank, an armored vehicle to police Peckham? And often what you're getting is people calling out and saying, "Hey, I saw somebody next door in his garage, in a garage. I don't know him, never seen him before. He might be breaking in." Police turn up. What do? The guy's got a mobile phone with his torch on, looking to see what these guys are coming. They shoot the guy. This is just 2 weeks ago, isn't it? They shoot the
Crazy.
guy. So guns make a difference, and the one of the reasons for guns in the American society is that everybody should bear arms so that if the government turns against you, you can protect yourself. It's supposed to be an element of freedom, but look how it's used. It's mainly used to decimate the black population, and we don't have that in the UK. So people don't end your life like that. But if you look at mental health institutions and the number of black men who are in mental health institutions and black women who are in mental health institutions, and overrepresentation in the prison system, and overrepresentation, in juvenile facilities and so on, and the lack of our representation in every part of society, then you realize that the institutional elements are pretty similar, but we don't have a militarized system which would end our life if we decide to just walk down the street or protest against it.
I think, to that point, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on what we can do today to make it a better tomorrow. Because it goes to the point that this has been an evolution. We've come a long way since slavery, since emancipation of I forgot what you call it, and the point of where it's crude, and it was like no blacks, no Irish, no dogs.
Mm-hmm.
It's going more and more behind the scenes, and it still feels, perhaps, as to your point, systemically there, but it's not as prominent. Kind of between the lines, it's these glass ceilings, and there are efforts. It feels like there are efforts. Maybe optically, there's efforts to kind of bring more representation to to the forefront.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just window dressing. One could argue. But what do you think? What do you think needs to be done to make it a better tomorrow? Like how can we get there? What do you think is a good place to focus on?
I think let's call it liberation. The freedom that we're all seeking to just be ourselves and get the same that anybody else would get. That's the secrets to achieving that hasn't changed. It's about, first of all, becoming conscious, second, organizing, third, organizing, fourth, organizing. Organizing is the key thing. If you're not organizing, then you're atomistic. You're on your own. You're literally on your own. And when we talk about unity, the reason for talking about unity is not that we all agree on everything. It's just that there are some things, if you've got to fight them, it's better not to fight them by yourself. You need to organize, and organization gives you an opportunity to build something which is sustainable beyond the individuals that get taken out. So they could take out Steve Biko in South Africa, when he was protesting in the townships against apartheid. But because they had organization, the organizations lived beyond them, and those transcended them, and you can continue. So we need to have organization, and the organizations need to be multi-level. Some of the organization, some parts of the organization need to do what they did with Black Lives Matter, go out and protest on the street, because that's necessary. Direct action sometimes is necessary, because if the thing is so egregious, you just have to get out on the street and tell people, hey, This is unacceptable. So some people will choose organization on the street. Other people will choose organizations through their trade union, through black organizations, community organizations, which is why we have such a proliferation of community organizations in this country. And they're trying to provide services, but sometimes they're providing a challenge to discrimination and the system of discrimination. So for me, it's so important to just organize. You are on your own unless you're part of some organization, and everybody needs to find the organization that suits them. Not everybody's going to run out on the street, hold up a placard in the middle of winter, but there are some people who that's their thing. I say go do that, and the rest of us should not criticize that. The rest of us should support it. Nowadays, you can support it on Instagram and go whatever it is. But one of the tendencies that we have in our communities is to criticize the things that don't look so pretty. But the ugly stuff sometimes is necessary to challenge the uglier stuff. You need to get out there and present a face to it. I've been on a ton of marches. To be quite honest, I never used to like marches because they always made me one of the organizers who used to have to run up and down. And if you're an organizer with a march, you had to have eyes for where you are and eyes for where the march is going. So sometimes you'd see crazy people just jump in and start doing crazy things like chucking bottles at policemen. And that's not going to end in a good place. So you need to pull that guy back because that's not our central purpose. And that would just wreck the whole thing just there and then. At the same time, you're kind of thinking, you know what? I should have flinged the bottle myself. And thankfully, I had enough common sense not to go do that. But sometimes the anger wells up in you and you just explode. And when you do, the most of the criticism that we get for explosion is from our own communities. And I think we need to have more understanding why people do explode. Why people choose paths which are not so pretty, and how to get them out of the situation that they're in once they get there, because they're part of our unity. They're potentially part of our organization. You can't afford to lose anybody. As they say in the army, no man left behind, or woman for that matter.
Yeah. I think it's really critical what you say, especially kind of plugging in the idea of more lines of communication these days. So you can kind of see, because of platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, you've got this newer generation that are also witnessing their version of injustice, and then kind of organizing over the internet. And this is potentially why Black Lives Matter, a movement that started in America, pops up all kind of in other places around the world, because actually this is all being shared all around. So I think as time goes on, as time is going on, and there are more platforms to communicate, I think we're seeing a positive movement towards, if this is a concept potentially, but true equality. At least it seems as if we're moving in that direction.
Yeah, I think what's you guys are living in interesting times. I wish I was your ages now, because you've got the tools which allow people to connect quickly and respond quickly to things. So organization and organizing is much easier than it was back then. We used to have to do fax machines, and before fax machines, a banding machine and posters and all that kind of stuff. But now you have a way to connect. And I think you're also living in one of the few generations that we've had where people are enlightened enough to say, hang on a minute, that's not right. You see a guy 8 minutes and 46 seconds losing his life with a man's knee on his neck, and you see the life expire for him while he's calling for his mother. And there's enough humanity that can look at that and say, that guy might not be my color. That guy might not be my race. That guy might not come from the same neighborhood. I have nothing, but that's just wrong. That is just wrong. And you're of a generation where they've set aside their personal interest and looked at something which is just so unjust and so egregious and said, no, I'm going to go out on the street and support these people. And the great thing about now is that there are more allies for Black people than there have ever been. And it's a great moment, and we've got to take advantage of that. I'm writing a book called Allies with a friend of mine, Adrian Sladin, and that book is about coming from different places, yet finding a common purpose that you could build together around this diversity and inclusion space. Because I think allies make it happen. Let's face it, there will be no Black Lives Matter on the scale that there is without Japanese students holding a placard saying Black Lives Matter, and you can't see a Black person for life anywhere in that picture or on that video clip. Absolutely everywhere. France, Italy, Rome. These are some of the places where Black people are catching real hell, and you've got white allies going out there and saying, no, this is wrong, and I'm not going to take it. And I think that's partly a result of the music, because rap music is international now. Reggae music is international, has been for some time, and people are in that lifestyle and they hear our messages. So the artists are the ones who have probably created this moment because people check for them. Do you know what I mean? People see themselves like Jay-Z or whoever, and love their music. And when you get, white boys rapping in their neighborhood in Newcastle, that tells you the culture has just transcended us and moved on. And now we have a connection. They're like us to some extent. And that's good because it opens the door for us to collaborate and, fight injustice. And some of them are experience injustice too. So, it's got to be reciprocal. We got to fight their fights against poverty, disadvantage, in the same way that we expect them to fight our fight for equality.
No, I absolutely agree. And so, I mean, like the tools that we have now in our hands is super powerful, and it goes to show a movement can be sort of spun up and mobilized in a matter of a day. We saw it at the Arab Springs as well, and it just goes to show, like, as you kind of alluded to, like the humanitarian within us, right? We when those sort of tragic, sort of horrific events happen on stage center, on American soil as well. This the kind of at the forefront and the vanguard of the Western world. It definitely raises alarm bells, I think, in a lot of people, and it's great that the reaction last year that we saw has been loud and proud across races.
So let's talk about Trump then.
Hey.
Oh, love that guy.
Whoa. Pull back.
You don't try to hijack this podcast with your friends. How dare you?
The takeover.
the Donald, he's an enigma. He's an enigma.
Our next subject takes a turn. I'll try to plug in your mate Donald Trump in there somewhere. I remember being quite young, probably about 8 or 9, and you, Dad, I would see X-Files on the TV and Star Trek, and of all the things I've got into, none of those things have ever been my cup of tea. X-Files, Star Trek, nah, not for me. But over time, you've started to see how some of the things used in these shows have kind of come to fruition into our lives in 2020. Like the prime example I could think of is the iPads in Star Trek, but they weren't called iPads, and then iPads had never been thought of. There were no touchscreen, tablets of anything, and then 20 years down the line,
you're advancing to Star Trek too far. The communicator, there was like a flip phone. It was like a Nokia flip phone, and that was what William Shatner used to use to communicate with whoever his crew, or down on the planet's surface. So back then, you remember I was just talking about the telephone. Back then we had a telephone with a wire. Nobody had a mobile phone. So the mobile phone was one of the things that somebody dreamt up in Star Trek, and then it became a reality. And you notice now that on science fiction programs, they've got this holographic thing. When they're flying spacecrafts, they're just
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
waving in the air. That technology is coming, you know. I'm sure that technology is coming where you
Yeah.
don't actually have to touch anything physical. That's the next stage. So science fiction kind of leads the way and gives us an appreciation of what's around the corner. I love it.
I don't know if you guys have watched Cable Guy with Jim Carrey. And he's like this crazy this cable network guy, and he's like, oh, the days where we're going to combine TV, phone, and computer in one device, and we'll be able to play Mortal Kombat with a friend in Vietnam, and that was like 1996.
I think it's called a Truman Show, where they've got
Oh
cameras on
yeah,
him. They've got cameras on him all the time, and his whole
yeah,
life they're following him, and his love life falls apart, and all of that kind of stuff. And then some years later, we got Big Brother, which was the
that's
Truman
it.
Show. So
Yeah,
a lot of stuff that comes out of TV, ends up in reality.
it's all real. It's all real.
Yeah.
Apparently, I think even some of these directors get scientists to like give them a bit of lead on what's coming in the next 30 years.
Yeah, the robot theme, with Terminator, the machines finally AIs taking over the world. Do you remember AIs used to be a concept, artificial intelligence? It's not a concept anymore. That's all people talk about now when they come to, the best in class computing. It's not actually AI. They're not thinking machines, but they're very fast algorithms which predict certain things. And it's only 2 minutes before we get Arnold Schwarzenegger killing us. It's, hey, I'm waiting for that kind of stuff. I'll be off the planet before that happens. So you're going to have to deal with Skynet and Arnie. He'll be
I'll
back.
be in Nevis. I'll fly to Nevis. Safe.
It'll be the only place left.
I think the name of our Skynet in the real world would probably be Amazon or Apple.
Yeah,
And
AppleNet.
and it will turn out to be one of these crazy things. One of the things I heard the other day, which was hilarious and also scary, given the events of 2020. I don't know if any of you have watched Black Mirror. In fact, I know both of you watched Black Mirror.
Yeah.
That's a lie. I know you have. Yeah. The guy who wrote it, I cannot remember his name. He hasn't come out with any new episodes for Black Mirror simply because the time that we're living in now almost is too bizarre. He can't write. He can't outpace what's actually happening.
It's true. It's true.
So,
There are all these movies about female robots, androids, and men falling in love with these androids, all
Oh
very
yeah.
fanciful. Guess what? One of the biggest sellers selling toys in Japan are female androids. They're not real androids. They don't do much, but they
wait,
move
can I
around.
interject? Can I interject?
You don't tell me. Don't tell me. There's something you should never tell
Wait,
your father, and I hope you just hold back on that.
don't worry. My thoughts are pure. My thoughts are totally pure. I was just going to interject, and I think that the reason why these female android robots probably sell is because I've heard that they do like amazing art pieces, and they produce all this kind of like these musical symphonies. So I think that men, especially, are buying that so that they can, use the
Yeah, that's
art
what they
to
want them
further
for.
our
They
cause.
want them for,
Yeah,
a Bach or a Beethoven symphony from your
yeah.
life doll is probably the thing to spend.
I thought it was the Symphony of Silence. The Symphony of Silence sounds a lot better.
Wow.
That sounds pretty good. But yeah, but there's all sorts of possibilities. Do you know the movie The Fly?
Oh yeah, old,
This
old.
this is
No.
this is where you got Jeff Goldblum. He has this experiment in teleportation. So he creates these pods, and he's moving across space, from one pod to the other, like you'd see in Star Trek or anything, where they disappear and they turn up in another place. Anyway, unfortunately, it's based on your atoms being scattered and then recombined in the next pod. Unfortunately, there's a fly in one of the pods, and his atoms get combined with the fly's atoms and DNA. And when he resurfaces in the next pod, then he starts to transform into this fly. All fanciful. But I was reading the other day that scientists have managed to move one, and it's a particle, subatomic particle, from one space to the other without going in between the intervening space. So that teleportation crap is possible.
I can't wait.
I know. Imagine, there you are in Charing Cross, and the next minute, back home.
Ooh. Is it back home? Is it really? I was thinking more LA. I was thinking I wasn't thinking back home. I was thinking LA.
Yeah, but when you recombine, you'll probably have half pigeon inside of you if you came from Charing Cross.
Oh gosh.
Pigeon man.
I'm waiting for flying cars. I think that's. I think that will happen in our lifetime.
That one's already kind of here because they've got these big drones, which are, Uber's doing them.
Yeah,
they've got these big drones which can think. They're more like helicopters than the Jetsons flying car, but they're here.
Yeah. Just need to put in my order.
Yeah.
Well, one of the advances that I am looking forward to. Hey, and if I can ever get enough money to get my hands on it, I'm taking it. That Neuralink by Elon Musk, like drill the hole in my skull. Give me the chip that's going to make me ultra intelligent and watch me manipulate every financial market in the world.
Why don't you, without the hole in your head? Why don't you just get a computer that can do that?
Wi-Fi.
Yeah, Wi-Fi.
I mean, I don't think it's been done. I'm not sure if it's been done, man.
It should be done. Somebody should do it.
Yeah, but I think his idea is quite interesting. Is one of the. He's already a guy that's already out there mentally. And this idea that you have this kind of implant in your brain that kind of opens your bandwidth so that the way you receive information is multiplied like X number of times, so you can receive information like simultaneously, like the internet. Actually, like the internet is just this world of information, and and you just put a search term in Google and it just throws it out at you. And the idea that can be like all internal, like you have a thought, and then ultimately as soon as that thought occurs, the answer also occurs and is backed by tons of other papers,
all the info from everywhere.
I think that's pretty interesting. I'm not sure if we'll see how it progresses. He's mentioned and alluded to a couple of times, within the next 5 to 10 years he's hoping to see it out there in production. But
as you are my child, I'm going to stand in front of anybody who wants to drill a hole in your head. That's just not going to happen. Don't hope for the hole in your head. You've got people who are going to stop that.
I think if you're over 18, you don't need consent from a parent.
Yeah, you're gonna need to restrain the parent to stop those people.
What's that term that they use in the NHS before you get an operation? Something consent. I forget the name of the term. But anyway, I consent. I'll sign all the terms and conditions, whatever you need. Yeah, take it now. I'll empty my bank account. It's okay. I'll get it back.
I'm in that room with an Uzi. Now, Ricky, I think Ricky should get that.
Oh yeah. No, I'm in.
I happen to have a Black & Decker drill. So let's get started on the drill. The drill thing, and just throw some electrodes in there and see what happens. Mix it up.
I'm out.
Just back on the funny topic of like AI and where we've come. I don't know if you guys have watched the film Her.
Yeah.
I don't know who it stars, but basically, it's the story plot is this guy. He gets a computer, and the computer starts talking to him, and it's got this AI, and it's a woman's voice,
Yeah,
and he starts building this very intimate relationship with this woman,
yeah,
which is well, not woman, it's this computer which has the voice of a woman. And what happened to me the other day was we was me and my daughter, she's 4, and we was in a room. We have Google Home, and
uh-huh,
the Google Home voice, or the Google voice, is a woman.
yeah,
And so when my little one was referring to Google, she was referring to Google as a her. And
yeah,
I was like, oh shit, wait, should we say her? Like, because when she responded, or when it responded, you
yeah,
know, it was like a woman's voice. So she said, oh, Google, she doesn't know anything, or Google knows everything.
yeah.
She's brilliant. So it's literally at that level of you, you might
Yeah,
you might
people humanize them, don't they?
yeah,
They
yeah.
humanize these machines. A friend of mine, whenever the Google thing comes on, she could be cooking or whatever. She says something, and the Google thing comes on and starts saying something. She hasn't activated it willfully. And the thing comes on, and she's like, "Oh, shut up! Why are you always coming?" And she's talking to this thing as if it's just another human being in the room who willfully did this thing. It's mad. We just start building relationships with everything.
Oh, I mean, I don't know if any of you guys have seen some of the crazy stuff on YouTube, but I saw one clip where you had like Alexa talking to Google Home, and 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 somehow like they've managed to kind of like get emotional on each other. And I'm not sure how much of this was doctored, by the way, but they've managed to get emotional on each other and plan to take over humanity in a way. Um, oh, I
Skynet.
will find it because it is some fascinating shit. You listen, you're watching this, and you're like, these two things that everybody has in their home are communicating with each other. Most of the time, people don't have two of these things. Do you know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
Most of the time,
Uh-huh.
people have just one of these things. And
To make them more realistic and lifelike, they ought to have them with Jamaican
oh,
accents. No other accents, just Jamaican accents. So instead of saying Alexa, and then Alexa says whatever you say, "Hey, answer me now, hurry up." And they come out and say, "Yeah, what happened? Yeah, come on. You're bad at me. I was just relaxing. Me and my bits and my bites, just a relax. And you wake me up for nothing. For what? And that you want? Yeah, that would really bring it
you
alive.
done you done that quite well. I think you should kind of maybe write into Google and just say, hey,
I think
suggestion.
so. I think
Yeah,
so.
that's diversity and inclusion at its finest.
I'm
Cutting
I'm
edge.
going I'm going there right now. As soon as we get off this broadcast, I am gonna go right there, and I'll probably be a
All right.
billionaire by afternoon. The Jamaican
Yeah, bring the
voice
drill.
guy is what they'll call me.
okay, so like in all seriousness, how long do you think it will be until we start to see like some type of, you know, androidish, cyborgish individuals in our society? Just even if it's like a very base model, like for
Yeah,
example, if it's uh, someone at a train station or just some operative. How
yeah.
long do you think, if possible, you might not think is actually will happen, but how long do you think that would happen in yeah, in reality?
I saw this ad the other day. It wasn't an ad. It was a Christmas thing that I think it was either Honda or Toyota, the car companies, did, because they're building robots now, robots that are lifelike, and they had different robots. They had a sort of humanoid kind of robot and a dog robot, and they were all doing dances. They did a sort of ensemble dance, group dance, and they're robots, and they walked, and the dog one looked like a dog, a skinny dog. And so I think that technology is here already. So the technology to get them to move and to do basic programs, I think that's already here. People are doing that already. for demonstration purposes. The question is, when do they arrive in your house or in your life and start doing stuff like directing traffic or stopping you, breaking lockdown? Because that would be the ultimate use for a robot, isn't it? You're all locked down and there you are in your house. You're thinking, I need a pork pie. I think I'll just step out for a pork pie. Next thing you know, bam, Terminator on you, and it's all over.
Yeah.
Well, it's like you can imagine like self-driving cars as well. You know, you won't need maybe that'd be first, like self-driving cars patrolling the streets.
Yeah.
And police are in there. They notice that there's a moving human, and then there's an announcement, and then if you don't comply, then the sort of like humanoid robot will come from like the backup,
pull your
and
car
this
away.
yeah, and all this will happen in like 2045. By 2045.
Is that your number?
Yeah.
That's my number.
Okay.
2045. My number's 2030. I think by 20, because I'm just hoping that I'll still be around to see it.
Okay.
2045, not so easy to get
You'll
to.
be here. You'll be here.
Okay. 2045, 2030.
What about you?
I'd probably 15 years from now, 2035-ish. I think in that decade between 2030 and 2040, I think a lot of this will just be part and parcel of it, I think even our attitudes towards it, as particularly myself and you, Rich, that we're millennials. I've got that in the inverted in quotes. That we knew a life kind of like in the prehistoric internet days, and then as our lives come to an end, or we're in the last chapter of our lives, we start to see these things, and I think we would just accept it. I think it will just be part of it, and our children, grandchildren, it's even more part of it. So I think in our lifetimes we'll see it. I think we'll see it.
I think the question, the thing with artificial technology is the freedoms that you lose. So just think about self-driving cars. If they make no other cars than self-driving cars, you suddenly lose the ability to drive. You lose the freedom to drive because they just ain't there, or they're not allowed on the street. So there are some things that we used to be able to do. Do we really want to give them up, even though the technology is there? Because I love driving.
The other argument to that, right? Not say argument, but there's like a case where, self-driving, you can sit in a car and watch your Netflix, and you get it from A to B, and I think that's more compelling and more immediate gratification than thinking, oh, what about if the government then does a lockdown and all cars are shut and you can't drive, can't move anywhere.
I mean, I think a more compelling argument is just safety. Just safety, simply. If all cars are on a grid, all kind of moving at the same pace, all kind of interacting with each other, you get less crashes, you get less human death.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately that's how all of it will be sold. I mean, that's how we give up our information, right?
That's how we give up our freedoms.
Yeah.
And we subtly we give up our freedoms. It's like we've given up all the stuff about us, to Google and to the other search engines, and to every time we click on accept the cookies, we give up something. We don't even think we're giving it up. We just think that we're getting the next thing. And that subtle process of losing your autonomy and your freedom is insidious.
Yep.
And there's a book, I can't remember what the book title was, but it was by a science fiction writer called Cecil Kornbluth. And the book essentially has a guy like Captain America who's frozen, and for many years, and then he wakes up in the future. And in the future that he wakes up in, everybody's a bit dumb. They're not smart at all. And they accept a lot of stuff. So they go in cars and they drive, and the car's speedometer says 70 miles an hour. But really, he looks out the window and they're only going at 30. So they've gotten used to government and the manufacturers creating their reality They think they're going fast, but they're only going at a safe speed.
Mm.
So these insidious things start to creep into our lives subtly. And you're right. You wake up one morning and you just accept them as reality, as
Yeah.
they've always been, but they haven't
Yeah.
always been. And there's a purpose within them.
We're lazy human beings, or we're lazy species, right? We want shortcuts. So if there's a easy way to get from A to B, and I can watch the last episode of Game of Thrones, then we're all in. We're all in.
Yeah, I'll have two. Sign me up.
So it's it'll be an interesting time. I think there won't be resistance, but as you say, it'll be a slow, perhaps potentially insidious, like intentions in it, and it'll be a surprise.
It's happening now. I mean, once upon a time we used to love to go shopping, but now, we think it's really great that you could just turn on Amazon and buy everything there. Everything, even a life doll, if you want one. It's just all there.
They're really pushing this lifestyle thing.
I think you've been doing a lot of research.
It's just something that sort of drifted into my consciousness. I thought that is really odd. That is really odd.
Just watch where you're leaving those cookies, right?
Yeah. The thing that you're both alluding to, it really it reminds me of Wall-E, the movie, the Disney one.
Yeah,
And everyone's up in this spaceship, pretty fat, like you mentioned, kind of a little bit slow. And you've got these robots, like Wall-E is an old robot of Earth, and it kind of remembers some of the niceties of Earth and kind of rudimentary things. Whereas, everyone, all the humans in the spaceship, they've forgotten that, they're pretty much just sitting on a seat, just, pressing.
Yeah, and they're all fat, weren't they?
They're fat, they don't do very much.
They don't do much.
And you think, like, this is where the whole kind of science fact and science fiction crosses, right? You think in movies and in TV shows, they're kind of giving you hints as to where it's going. They're kind of giving you hints, like, and there's a ton of them, and there's a ton of them.
Big hints.
Yet we still go there. It's talking to us about our nature, and actually some of that nature is quite inescapable. As an individual, potentially you can escape it, but as a species, I think there's a movement towards being fat and lazy and just and weak and weak potentially,
or being the android or being the robot.
Yeah.
There's a great series, Raised by Wolves, and it's about these robots who bring up these human children, on a distant planet, and the insidious thing about that thing is that you start rooting for the android, not for the humans, and you think, bloody hell, they're the robots. We should be pushing for the human beings, and the human beings are pretty awful, but the robots are the best that they can be. Except, she's got a sort of Homelander beam that she could fry people with, and a scream that blast them apart, to protect her children.
Right. It's funny how we'll quickly like flock to the hero. Do you know what I mean? Depending on who that hero is, human or not.
Doesn't matter what it is.
Oh. There's another book, just quickly, called Ready Player One. I think it's a film as well. So you guys familiar with that?
Spielberg movie. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's an interesting world where AR, VR kind of comes into play, and you have this dystopian, derelict world, desolate world, and you escape in this VR world. This next world. You put the goggles on, and that's your world, and this is it. And that I can see happening. I mean,
People are in it. There were some guys who live it already. They don't have the VR stuff. It's not that, but there are guys who wake up in the morning, they get on an Xbox, and they play all day, and then go to sleep. Then they take a break to go to the toilet or eat a bag of crisps or whatever it is, and that's it. This is Donald Trump's 400-pound guy, who stole the election. But he's real. He's real. That's some people's life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Crazy. Don't be the guy.
Nah, I won't. I'll try not to be that
No,
guy. I need to get in the gym. Oh gosh, we've just locked down.
oh yeah, that.
Yeah, dang.
Well, I think
Dang.
a final thought from me, at least. Everyone here can offer a final thought. I think it's important for us to appreciate the faculties we have as humans. Do you know what I mean? Like, and not give them up so easily to automation or for convenience. I think as a species, we're highly capable. There's a lot of our cognitive ability that we haven't truly explored. And I think if an individual at least keeps a curiosity open for that and is always kind of, pushing for more, that's why guys like Joe Rogan are my guys, always kind of pushing for more and trying to strive for the best of human excellence. I think life is then, you steer away from that whole kind of Wall-E future.
Yeah.
You're kind of looking at a more, I don't know, humans are the advanced beings as opposed to information and code. That's me.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So
I like that. I
any
like that.
any final words, Joel?
Well, there is a guy called Herbert Marcuse who's a Marxist thinker, and he wrote a book called One Dimensional Man, and it was about the Enlightenment, and it was all about machine society or technology, giving us some opportunities to transform who we are. But he always posed the danger of that transformation making us the Wall-E people who go in one direction and give up all our freedoms. So as with technology comes the possibility of losing freedom as well as gaining the ability to do certain things. And I suppose the ultimate loss of freedom or loss of self is where they take your brain out and put it in a robot. And maybe one day that might be the way that people decide to sustain their lives, and so on. Unfortunately, I won't be able to see it. I wish I did. So we have to kind of live this through the movies, comics, and other media. But it's so great. I've lived long enough to see some of the things that I thought were just fantasy and would love to see come true, and they're here now. So you guys have got a really really interesting time ahead of you, because you're going to be able to live to see the flying car.
Can't
Ricky?
wait. Can't wait. The future's bright.
Don't
The
say it.
future's orange.
The future's flying. Yeah, that's what Donald Trump said, isn't it? The future's bright, the future's orange.
So, Ricky, final words for you?
All right. Future's bright. Future's orange.
and guys, with that and possibly a lawsuit to follow, we're out.
Take care.